Hey guys, Henning from FlippedNormals here, and in today's video we are going to be talking about brushes in ZBrush. A big problem in ZBrush is there are just too many brushes. If we take a look at the available brushes we have in ZBrush by default, this is enough to give anyone a headache, and particularly if you're a beginner, you might try every single one of them and you just don't know when you're going to be using different ones. So in today's video we are going through the brushes you will actually be using. So before we get into exactly what brushes we're going to be using, let's talk about how we can actually map the brushes to hotkeys. I'm using the numbers row above my keys 1 to around 6 and 7, depending on how many brushes I use. And these will be the main keys I use for my hotkeys. This means you don't have to use advanced hotkeys like B, M, V, and remember 3 keys. You only remember 1 key. So first, what you do is you click on the brushes you want. Then you select the brush you want. In this case, maybe you want this slide brush. We're not really going to be using this one, but for the sake of argument, we will just stick to this one. Click slide. Now you can see it pops up here. And if you go to brush, it also pops up here. So if you want to hotkey something, you hold down Alt and Control, and you click on it. And now you can see on the top, it's going to say click the key you want to assign to this brush. Now we hit, for instance, the 0 key, and you can see this is assigned to something else. Hit OK if you want to use this hotkey, if you want to reassign it. If not, do it cancel. Then once you're done with that, you go to, once you've done all of them, you go to preferences, hotkeys, and then you hit store, and you can also hit save out as well. So now you can load in this hotkey file, and store means that it will load this file, this hotkey file, every single time you are restarting ZBrush. So the brushes we are going to be using now are going to be the move brush, standard, damn standard, clay buildup, smooth, and trim dynamic. We're going to be starting off with the move brush. The move brush is fantastic for all sorts of things. I have mapped this to the 4 key. Where this is really useful is, for instance, if you want to change the shape of something real quick, you can easily do that with the move brush, where we can now just drag out the clean shapes you want, and you can just keep moving from here. This works really well with Dynamesh as well. So for instance, if you want to move the brush out like this, move the geometry out like this with the move brush, then you can Dynamesh, and now you have clean geometry or clean working topology for this. You can move this further out and you can Dynamesh it. So the move brush is just phenomenal at actually moving shapes around. You're not just using this early on though when it comes to actually blocking things in. You'll also be using this a lot. For instance, we have a shape like this where you have a character and he's a bit rigid. So what we have to do is we have to go in and we have to just move some things around. We just want to make him a bit more interesting. We want to give him some more curves. And this is a model which is around 7 million or 2 million polys. So in this case, we can just go in and we can just start to do bigger changes to him. So essentially the move brush is fantastic when you need to move things around. Then the second brush we are going to take a look at is the standard brush. The standard brush has a bunch of different use cases. We are going to be looking at the first one now, which is general like mid-frequency sculpting. So here we have a character where we already have a lot of the fine frequency in, just using the FlippedNormals skin kit just to get a lot of this stuff in. But we want to enhance some of this. Maybe we want this wrinkle here to be a lot bigger. So now we can go in with the standard brush, which I have mapped to the letter 2. And then we can go in and we can just start to give it some volume. As you can see, this works with the details which are already there. Some brushes, like the clay brushes, will destroy it. It will replace what's there. Well, the standard brush is fantastic in this sense because it will just keep pushing and pulling whatever's there up and down, which means that you're not going to have to redo all the wrinkles. So I really prefer this way of working, where first you are blocking out the main pores and all this kind of stuff, and then you can go in later on and you can really enhance what is there with the standard brush like so. It's also really good if you want to add a lot of specificity. In this case, let's say we want this line to be sharper, but we don't want it to be like a mechanical sharp line. We just want it to be more defined. Then we can go over with the standard brush and we can just sharpen it up simply just by brushing it. So like so, and this is a great way of adding like some variety, but you see if my brush is going like up and down like this. So then we can just go over it like so, and then we can just start, enhance some of the things we already put down. The standard brush is also great if you want to add alphas to your alpha details to your model. In this case, we'll change the stroke type to drag rect. Then we'll just add an alpha. In this case, we're just going to use alpha 07. And now you can see that we can just drag out a lot of these alphas. This is great if you're using our skin kit, or if you're using any other alphas in ZBrush. You probably want to stick to just a standard brush with the drag rect and selecting alpha. We can easily just disable the alpha by clicking on alpha off, and drag rect back to freehand or 2 dots, whatever we prefer. And now we can just keep on sculpting with this. Then the next one we're going to be using is kind of similar to the standard brush, but it's a modified version of it. It's called the Dam standard brush. I've mapped this to number 5 on the keyboard. You can just find this by B, D, and you can find this under here, S. Where this is great is that we can very easily add big cuts into our model. You can see here, we can add this really nice sharp line going in like so. Now, obviously in this case, this is terrible, but where we can use this is, for instance, if we want to really enhance some of these wrinkles we have here. We can go in and we can just really start to enhance what's there. You can use a bigger brush, which means you get more low frequency shapes like this. So now you just get more volume in them. I tend to do this a lot where I'm just going over my shapes, and I'm just using the Dam standard to add volume to it. What's also cool is you can hold down the Alt key, and this is going to give you sharp lines. This is not crazy useful at this stage of the model, you know, where the model is essentially there, but it's really useful if you are, for instance, in an earlier stage of the model and you need to do something like this. You need to add more sharpness to it like so. So I really like Dam standard in the sense that it's like one of my finalizing brushes to really refine the shapes. You can just see how easily you can get these nice, clean, sharp shapes. So Dam standard is a brush I use a lot. Next up, we have Clay Buildup. I have mapped this to number 3 on the keyboard, and it's found right there. By default, this has a square alpha. This is nice, but it has too much texture for my sake. You can see here if we start brushing now, that this just has a lot of texture built into it, which can be great, but I find that it's really easy to get lost in the brush strokes when you're sculpting. As you can also see with the clay brushes, or the Clay Buildup brush specifically here, is that when you start to build up, you lose everything below it. So you don't want to use this as a finalizing stage. Like after you've done all the pores and everything, you want to use this brush before you've done all the pores. So I tend to use the Clay Buildup brush with either no alpha, like this. You can now see you get this really soft result. Or I tend to use it with alpha 06, which is this one here, which is kind of like in between stage of it. It doesn't give you that sharp brush strokes, but it also doesn't give you like this incredibly soft result. When I'm using the Clay Buildup brush, I'm going across the shape. So I'm not going like this on a shape. I'm going like this. Stroke, 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 stroke. This just gives me a lot better control. And this also allows me to not really use the smooth brush a whole lot. A lot of people, when they work, they're sculpting, smoothing, sculpting, smoothing. And that's a fine workflow for some people. It's not my personal way of doing it. I find that with the clay brushes, I can avoid using the smooth brush at nearly all times. So for instance, a way I prefer to work when I'm starting off is that, let's just turn this into polymesh, and we have symmetry on, is that I'll start up just like holding down the Alt key, and then I'll get in some eyes, and then I'll just sculpt regularly, get in some eye sockets, and then we'll go in, get some cheekbones in, get some of the sculpt parts for the nose, and then I'll just work it up from here. Then I'll take it through with the move brush, and then I'll start to shape it up, dynamesh a little bit, and from there we start to shape it up more. So the clay brushes is a brush, or the particular Clay Buildup brush is a brush I'll use throughout my entire sculpting. It's a really, really versatile brush, and you will really find this to be a great brush once you turn off the hard alphas and you start using either alpha 06 or you start using no alpha. You can see here as well, if we go to this model here, We'll talk a bit more about this one later on, where right now, this has a bit too much stuff going on here. So what you might want to do is hold down the Alt key and then simply just sculpt on top of it. Remove the Alt key, hold down the Alt key, and you can see it just refines the shape when I'm sculpting over it. This is instead of just smoothing it down to oblivion, where I'm instead going over the shape and refining the shape. In a case like this, I would probably set the intensity lower as well, so that we now have an intensity of maybe around 10 or 6. And this just allows us to go over the shapes and blend the shape together. The advantage of doing it this way, instead of just smoothing it down, is that this allows us to refine the shape. It allows me to look over this and like think, oh, the shape can go like this. Then I will go like this and just work over it. So this is a really, really powerful way of working. It allows you to refine the shape as you're going along and just make the model continuously better instead of working in stages, which is block in, and then you're suddenly done with block in. Now it's just adding skin and fat. It allows you to work in a more non-linear fashion and just keep refining all the shapes as you're going along. So in this case, you can see how much nicer we can, or how much refinement we can get into the shapes just by using the Clay Buildup brush with no alpha. And then later on, we can go in and add alpha 06 to it. And then we can start to add more refinement again into our model. Then we'll look into the smooth brush. Let's just undo this so we can go back to our original model, which is deliberately broken like this. The smooth brush is great in a case like this where you need to smooth something out. A lot of cases where, particularly if I'm taking over student work, I don't want to just like move stuff around and tweak it. I want to kind of like destroy a bit what's there so that we can rebuild from scratch. In a case like this is a great example. Now we can go over and we can just smooth stuff out like so. And you can see that everything just becomes smoother and nicer. Problem with this is that it does destroy the form. So be very aware of that you do destroy the form by using the smooth brush, which may be good, may be bad. You access the smooth brush simply by holding down the shift key, and releasing the shift key takes you back to the regular brush. So regular sculpting, hold down the shift key, regular sculpting, hold down the shift key. So this means if you do prefer this method, you can work really fast. It means that you can add some volume, you can smooth it down, you can add some more volume, smooth it down. So it's kind of like you're adding volume and then we're integrating it into it. Adding volume, integrating. You can also see that if you are clever about this, you can have areas like this area here, which has a lot of texture, and you can smooth out the other parts. So it's not like you have to destroy all the shape. It means that you can have areas which will be smooth and areas which will be hard, like this. And then you can start to have areas like this where you're just blending it in like so. So the smooth brush isn't evil. There is definitely a use case for it. It's just not my personal way of working. But you know, if you prefer it, awesome. A little tip as well is that we can use a brush called Smooth Stronger. In this case, in order for us to smooth stuff down because of the high poly count, it can be pretty tricky with the regular smooth brush. So what we can do is if we hit the comma key or we click Lightbox, we can go to Brush, and under Brushes, we have Smooth. There are a bunch of general brushes in here. And one of them we're going to be using now is going to be Smooth Stronger. We find that right here. So now if we double click it, and now it will tell you, hey, this brush will be selected as the sculpting smooth brush. Press the shift key and then click to activate it. So we do that. Now if we hit the shift key, you can see we have smooth, strong, or active. And now you can see if we hit the shift key now, this is just going to like destroy our model. It's just going to remove essentially anything on it and just equalize everything down. This is fantastic for high res models, as in some cases you literally can't use smooth brush on because the model is too high res. That said, be careful. If you have like a low res model like this, it's just going to destroy everything. It's like one click and you just destroyed all the shape. But this can be cool as well. For instance, if you know about it, then you can almost use it as like a trim brush. See, in this case, it's almost like I want these shapes to be clean. I'm kind of going over with Smooth Stronger, and it acts essentially as some kind of trim brush, which really gives you good, clean planes like this. And then you can just hold down the Smooth Stronger again, a little bit less intensity on your brush strokes, and you can start to blend it. As you can see as well, if you hold down the shift key now, you can see we have the intensity up here set to 100 when the smooth brush is active. and set to 23 when the clay brush is active. This means that the smooth brush has a separate intensity slider. So if we now want to hold down the shift key and set the smooth stronger to be something like 30, we can now go over and we can have less of a smooth stronger brush, which means you can get something in between smooth stronger and regular smooth, which can work better on models like this. And then we have trim dynamic. We're just going to go back to the original version here as well, and I'll show you where trim dynamic is useful. If we hit the B key, T and D, then we get trim dynamic. I will set this to the 6 hotkey as well. Trim dynamic is useful because it allows you to get really clean planes. That's something that you won't do at the final stages of your modeling, but it means it's something you might want to do early on, because early on you might want really nice clean planes. Particularly if we look at the back here, there's a lot of junk sculpting here. It's a lot of ambiguous sculpting, and you might want to be tempted to keep what's here because of the brush strokes might look cool, or you have small little bumps which you like, but it doesn't really add a whole lot to the sculpting. So what we can do, we can just use the trim dynamic, and then we can just start to sculpt like so. And now you can see we get really clean shapes. You may not want this shape to be that clean, but what we can do, we can set the intensity down a little bit, and then we can work over the shape as well. Sometimes I've even set this to be the smooth brush, meaning I hold on the shift key, and then I set trim dynamic wherever it is. See, this is the problem, right? There are so many brushes that you don't necessarily know where they are. That's why I use hotkeys. But then we can click the shift key. So now if we hold down, sorry, then we can click the trim dynamic brush. And then now if I hold down the shift key, it's going to use trim dynamic, which forces me to think about shape instead of just blocking or removing the shape. It forces me to think about what I'm doing when I hold down the shift key. So that's just a little tip for you. Holding the shift key allows you to actually change this to any other brush if you want to go between two brushes, like so. So those are the brushes we are using most of the time. I want to show you just a quick demo of how I'm actually using these brushes. Here we have an early version of the final result for Intro to Sculpting. This is like after chapter 1. I'm not sure exactly how long this is. Maybe it's like half an hour. And at this point, we need to refine him a lot. So I'm just going to do a quick demo. For instance, looking at his eyes, these are a bit too far out. So I want to use the move brush now to move them a little bit in. And then I want to refine the design a little. Make sure perspective is enabled. And then I want to just refine some of these shapes. Just a little bit. And then you see his eyes are very cartoony. I want to make them more realistic. And in this case, using the move brush is great for that. You can sharpen his eyes like this on either side. And then we can just shape his eyes just a little bit in general. So this is where the move brush is great, because it allows you to very quickly make big design changes. Then we can do a dynamesh. We can add a little bit more resolution. So now we have an overall shape of the eye. But what I want to do now is I want to refine the eyelid in general. So I want to use the damn standard brush, which I've set to 5. Then I want to force in an eyelid like so. So now we kind of have an eyelid. Doing the same thing here. We can force in a shape like so. And then we can force in a bottom eyelid as well. And then we can use the move brush again. We can move this a little bit out like this, which means that it's going to conform to like an actual eyeball, because you want the eyeball when you're doing the eye. Then we can use the smooth brush. Now we have to set this back to the actual smooth brush. So now if I hold down the shift key, now I can just smooth out a little bit like so. And we can just smooth this shape out a little bit. And you can now see the eyes are looking a lot better just by using just a few simple brushes. Then we can just move brush again to move this down, try to get the emotion across of what you want the character to feel like. You want him to feel evil and mean. So let's just move this down early on. Move brush again is great. And then I'll switch to Clay Buildup with the Alpha 06. And then we'll just start to refine it. And here you can see I'm just working over the model. You don't just want to keep using the move brush over and over again. You want to add refinement to the model. Like this. You can see I'm adding some lines going down, and then I'm working across them. Then we'll go in and hold on the Alt key and we'll add some refinement to the nose. Then we'll go across it like so, and we'll add some more features like the wings of the nose. And you can quickly see that the model just becomes more refined as we go along like this. We can get in some definition of the cheekbones like this, right here. We can add cheekbones or the zygomatic here as well. This is where the basically the cavity of the face, just it's adding or the cavity of the eye, just adding a little bit of definition here. And now you can just see the model just becomes more refined. It's not like I'm going over with a standard brush and just pushing and pulling some things here with the move brush. I'm just refining the model. So this is my main approach for sculpting. I'm using the Clay Buildup brush for the vast majority of all my work. And then I'm going in with the move brush to refine the shapes a little bit, the standard brush to refine the shapes, the standard brush to really add some like creases and scars and wrinkles and these kind of things. Early on, I might use the Clay Buildup, or I might use the trim dynamic brushes to add shape to things and to add planes. But for the vast majority of the time, you can get away with using only the Clay Buildup brush. In the case like this, where we have a little even more resolution, this is dynamesh this once more. Now you can see that we still have a lot of brush strokes here, and a way of getting rid of that might be to smooth it down, which is a totally legit way of doing it. My preferred way is now to go over with the Clay Buildup brush and low intensity, and then we just go over it and we just work across the shape like so. And you can see that the shape becomes more refined as we're doing it, and the brush strokes are now disappearing. The reason we want to remove the brush strokes is because you don't want them there in the final thing unless you're doing something which emulates real clay. It's really tempting to keep the brush strokes there because it makes it look more artistic. But if you're doing like an actual character, you have to, like a human character made of skin, you have to remove the brush strokes simply because it's not going to read as human. It's going to read more as clay. So now you can see that pretty quickly the shape becomes a lot more refined, and we are getting rid of the brush strokes, and we're just going to set the intensity lower and lower and lower. And every time you decrease the intensity, you can zoom in a little bit more, and you can refine the shapes just a little bit more as well. And at the end of this, it's almost like a progressive renderer. You're just seeing less and less noise in the render. The shapes are just progressing more and more. It's like you can't really see the shape progressing that fast, but it just becomes a little bit better, one area at a time. And you didn't use a smooth brush, you didn't use anything fancy, you just use one brush over and over again, and you just properly control the shape, which is really cool. Of course, you can also go over with the smooth brush as well. At this point, this is where it might make a lot of sense to go with a smooth brush, because now you can see that we still have brush strokes, but they can be a bit hard to remove as well, because if we try to go, we have to just keep iterating and iterating, going over this like 10 more times, you know, lower and lower. At the end, you have like intensity of like 1. And you do get really clean shapes by doing this, but at some point you just have to go, all right, it's good enough. Let's just clean up shop now, and let's just hold on shift key and let's just smooth it out. So it's not that the smooth brush is bad, it's just there is a time and place for it. So now you can see some nice clean shapes very quickly by using the move brush, standard brush, just a little bit, damp standard, Clay Buildup. So the brushes we use by far the most would be exactly that. Start off with the move brush, get the shapes where you want them to be, maybe refine the shapes a little bit with the standard brush, go in, add creases and wrinkles with the damp standard, go in with the clay brushes, particularly Clay Buildup, set the alpha to alpha 06, and then really just go in and refine the shapes. Use a smooth brush to get rid of brush strokes and to destroy form, and be careful with the smooth brush so that you don't just accidentally destroy form and you just end up with this like soft gooey shape. So I really hope you liked this video. If you're interested in learning more about sculpting, I recommend our Introduction to Sculpting series, which takes you through essentially everything you need to know about sculpting, including what we just talked about in this video. And if you just want to check out more sculpting videos for free on YouTube, we have a bunch of that as well on our channel, so make sure to check that out as well. And thank you so much for watching.